Hello, and welcome to Smells Like Identity Hygiene, the podcast where we talk about all things identity security and staying one step ahead of the digital entropy. So today's guest is someone who's been shaping the way we think about cybersecurity for decades, Ed Amoroso. Ed was the longtime CISO at AT&T, where he helped pioneer concepts like threat trees and early microsegmentation. He's currently the founder and CEO of Tag Cyber, a professor at NYU, an author, and a member of multiple advisory boards, and one of the clearest voices in cybersecurity commentary today. Whether it's demystifying zero trust or calling out vendor fluff, he's been in the trenches, in the boardroom, and increasingly on video with his new series, Tag Talk. And today, we'll be talking about the state of identity security in the age of AI, why shadow AI might be the next insider threat, and what it really means to govern digital access across a fragmented enterprise. Ed, thanks so much for being here.
Those are some pretty juicy topics. I'm looking forward to that.
Well, we'll see where it goes. You know, usually I have a plan for where the conversation will go, but we might go, different ways.
Yeah, it's a little left or right?
Yeah. So the first question I have for you, Ed. So we talk about, actually, you had a recent LinkedIn post around flat budgets, right? The rising threat of AI, yet CISOs are faced with flat or possibly even shrinking budgets. I guess with all the AI threats looming out there, how can CISOs do more with less?
Well, first off, thank you for including me in the discussion. I love the work that you do, and this is going to be fun. Now, for CISOs, we get nervous when we hear about flat budgets, but when you look at your peers, like in an organization, it's like total Crimea River, right? I mean, they've been dealing with flat budgets for a long time. If you're a CIO or you work in IT ops or in procurement, supply chain, this is normal. Like none of them have had, 10, 15% budget increases every year for the last 10 years. So we've developed some bad habits where we feel like, hey, we carry our budget over. I keep doing what I've been doing. I add a bunch of new stuff, scream that, there's nation state threats and AI guardrails and compliance, and I'm going to get a bunch of new money. That did work for a while, not going to work anymore. We're at the point now where it's not vendor fatigue, Rosie. It's sort of like we've reached maturity. And that's something we should be proud of. It's not oftentimes that a new discipline in business reaches a level of maturity, meaning it's a structural component of the way businesses run. You're not going to see any business anywhere of any consequence that doesn't have a security team and a leader. That's great. We should feel really good about that. But again, welcome to the game here. That means now the new economics that we have to learn as security people is not how do we spend because we have all this money. It's got to be how do we optimize? How do we roll what we have into a more rational portfolio? So I think that this question of, there's AI threats and all these other things we deal with, again, Crimea River, that's normal. If you're an IT manager, they're going to say, yeah, I'm dealing with all kinds of problems too. We're deploying apps and using cloud and figuring out where to put AI. They have the same problem, but they're being asked to do so either with a flat or reduced budget. And I come from telecom, which was just year after year reduced budget. That was the whole idea. So I think it's healthy. I don't log it as, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? I lock it as, oh my gosh, now what are we going to do? This is, I think it's more positive, and I think people will grow up real quickly and become real managers, real executives who understand return. So I think it's a good thing.
So do you feel that, everyone talks about AI, specifically agentic AI, all anyone was talking about at RSA and Identiverse, and I think the consensus is, at least for AI people, is that we will fundamentally change, or the way that we work will fundamentally change. Not just technology people, but across the board, work will change. So I'm about to ask you a really unfair question to predict what's going to happen in 5 years, especially when you are at the beginning of something like where we are right now. If you had to predict the way that work will change in 5 years, not just technology people, but work in general, do you feel that CISOs and security organizations are prepared to deal with that new reality?
Well, let's start with what I think is going to happen, which I'm very bullish on. I think I have a pretty positive view on the broad impact of AI because I do think that we'll manage it properly. I know there's a lot of doom and gloom on the internet. I watch all the same things a lot of your viewers watch. It's like, oh, AI is going to take over human beings and so on. I don't prescribe to that. So, and then I'll share what I think with respect to the question around CISOs being prepared, which I think they're not. But first off, I think that anytime we see a brand new, really fundamental change in either science, engineering, or society, we all freak out and we think it's like they're going to be the end or some magic or create human life or crazy stuff like that. Like chemistry had alchemy and we threw out those potions. And it wasn't dumb people doing potions, it was Newton. Like Newton spent it between calculus and physics, he did potions, magic potions. So, I mean, it's not like there's dummies doing this. Astronomy had to throw out astrology. We still see the remnants of that. I think there's probably more people who believe in astrology than climate change. Mathematics and numerology. And now in computing, we have this idea of artificial life. Now, there's no question that generative AI, whether passive, like in a ChatGPT setting where human beings asking it to do something, generates your English composition report for 8th grade, or an agentic AI where it's active, it's some autonomous workload that's managing the heating system in a building, responding to things, and just being the building manager. I think that the possibilities there are amazing, and it's not like replacing humans, but it's making our lives better if we do it right. Every technology has its good and its bad. Would you say nuclear has been good or bad? Well, I mean, we generate nuclear power, and nuclear energy certainly is going to be required to get to Mars and so on. But then we get nervous because we have nuclear weapons. Again, welcome to the advance of technology, good and bad. So AI, same thing. So now for CISOs, the question is, what's the impact on cybersecurity? Well, the obvious impact is that anything manual is going to go away. I mean, there's no question about that. The idea for me of SOC managers still believing that there will be human beings there in a couple of years is a clinging to a model that they don't want to disrupt. And I always say, if you're unwilling to disrupt, then you shouldn't be in tech, because tech means disrupt. That's what it means. That's why you get into this. If you don't want to do that, go play violin in an orchestra or something. Something is not going to change. Even that probably changes. But for the most part, our discipline, the discipline of cybersecurity, not only will change, but it must change. So anything that can be automated will. Anything that can be mechanized will. But the thing that can't be mechanized is human judgment, human empathy, human communication, human connection. And I've been telling my students, like you mentioned earlier, I've been a professor for 4 decades now, the last 10 years, teaching pretty intensely at New York University. I would tell people that the skills of the future are not going to be the ability to crunch out a report or to crunch out a math problem, but to provide insight, human guidance, and empathy. I think that engineers are going to have to really rethink whether a full engineering curriculum makes sense without liberal arts. I'd almost rather see an extra year of philosophy and ethics as opposed to Calc 4 after you've had 3 years of it. Take it from somebody who's physics, math, computers. I mean, I'm as right brain. I don't know if it's right or left brain. Because the left brain is where you do the math, whatever that is. I've always been.
I always confuse the two.
But the jobs of the future are going to be softer jobs, human jobs, and I like that. I think that promises a future of human beings reconnecting. So, instead of seeing people walking down the street staring into their phone, maybe they'll crave human connection. Maybe for you and I, our grandchildren won't be addicted to phones. They'll think you and I are ridiculous, and they'll want to go hang out with other human beings, perhaps lampooning the way we've lived. So that's the way I see it. I see this as being a transition that's going to be for the good. But again, keeping in mind, every new technology is good and bad. And I get that, yes, there are some, killer robots in an army terrify me. There's some things that I don't like. But I think if we manage it properly, it can be something that makes people's lives and CISOs' lives much better.
It's interesting. So I obviously use AI for a lot of what I do. One of the things that I've done is I've created a podcast producer GPT. So it has all the previous episodes, the transcripts. It kind of knows how these episodes go, and I ask it to put together a list of questions for the guest. I'll give it the guest's LinkedIn profile and say, put together some questions, or put together the introduction. But I always have to go back and I always have to check and say, okay, did it make stuff up?
Yeah.
Right? Even for you, your introduction, every single bit. And notice before we started recording, I asked you, are you okay with this? Because just in case, maybe. But the thing is, like, as much as I knew the AI could make stuff up, even my research could be incorrect. So I still had to check it, the double human check of making sure.
Yeah.
And if we think about that idea of, and maybe AI will evolve to the point where hallucinations no longer happen. Let's say that happens. But if we think about the idea of a human identity, that concept of that human has a supervisor, that supervisor has a manager. So that unpredictable nature of a human has a checks and balances in a typical organization. And we've been doing this since cavemen were organizing on how to do work, right? There's that structure. Machine identities, I would argue, we do a very bad job as an industry managing machine identities today. I believe that AI or agentic AI really should be a whole new category of identity, because you have a little bit of that kind of unpredictable, kind of autonomy that a human has, along with the automation that a typical machine identity would have, like the ability to make lots of changes all in bulk. Would you agree that it should be like there should be a whole new category of identity?
Well, a whole new interpretation. I agree completely that we need to rethink. I'll give you an example. So if you're talking to somebody who works, say, at a telco, and you ask them about identity, and let's say they're talking to somebody who works at a bank. So, and I've worked at both. I've been on the board of a large bank and CISO of a large telco. So let's connect those two. If you ask the person at the telco, hey, what is the identity of your customer? They'd say, well, what do you mean? It's a simple question. The Rosie is a customer of yours with Rosie's family using our service. So what's the identity? And you'd say, well, let's start with the billing address and the name of the person who pays the bill. And you go, okay, that's probably the mom or the dad in the family or something. What else? You go, well, how about the serial number of all the equipment that exists in their, in the portfolio of stuff that we've sold them, their phone, their set-top box, all kinds of other stuff. That's part of their identity. How about the fact that they have email addresses with us? That's part of their identity. How about there are, unique customer numbers that we use for each of the services? How about, and I could go on and on and on and on and on. And I can tell you that a typical service provider would say that your identity is this vector that might have as many as a dozen different categories of things that I would use to reference you. Then you go to the bank. The first thing they'd say is, well, we don't provide set-top boxes, and we're certainly not selling you an iPhone, and we're certainly not, and all those hardware identifiers have no meaning. And they'd say, well, now when we talk about identity, we talk about, who has access to this account and what's been authorized for this or that, and what are the nuances? What can you read? Can you change? Can you up? It's a completely different sort of portfolio of identity attributes and different types of access permissions. So you mentioned workload and agentic AI. Absolutely ditto. So now it's like, okay, what are we talking about? There's a big difference between an agentic AI that is providing safety systems for vehicles versus an agentic AI that's sitting on a website that responds to requests for, drawing pictures of like little descriptions. Fundamentally different. And the identity is going to be different for both its own back end, its inter-agent communication, probably using something like the Model Context Protocol, or its interaction with human beings. So it's kind of fun because you get to redefine a new vector, but it's the same thing. It's what are the attributes that matter for this entity, this active or passive entity we're calling agents now. I use the word agent for both passive and active. Like I would call ChatGPT an agent. People sometimes cringe, but I just say there's passive agents, active agents. Let's just call them any AI workload an agent, but whatever. They do need identity. Now, when we talk about the business of that, then I always think, all right, how complex is the metadata, the vector, and what's the size of the potential market? And it's unbounded. Right? So I know you're very much in the identity business. I've learned a lot of things from you and from your company, from Sphere. You guys are really experts at this. When I look at the addressable market for humans and human beings, I mean, obviously that taps out at 8 billion, but it's not, not going to get 8 billion, but whatever. For the agentic possibility, it's way more than that. It's way more. It's unbounded. So I think that's going to be a really interesting market. It's going to be one, it's not going to be chaos. At least I hope it don't. We'll build some structure around it. But I think that the size of this eventually, say 5 years from now, probably dwarfs user identity and so expanding into other areas. So that would be a nice new business for Sphere and for the work that you do. I have a feeling is going to bleed very much into workload. We do service accounts now, so it's more or less just not a distant cousin, it's a first cousin to service accounts.
Yeah, and I guess that brings up the next question that I have for you is, do you think current IGA, PAM, IAM solutions are prepared for what's to come with, or at least if you believe the hype of what's to come, right, with agentic AI? Are those tools prepared, and will they be prepared for what's to come?
So first off, there used to be a lot of hype around AI, no question. There was a time when we talked about it, didn't know what the hell we were talking about. So that was bad. But now I see the algorithms, I see the size of the data sets, I see the power of the processing. That's why NVIDIA is such a powerful company. So it's not hype anymore. That's gone. Now, are we as an industry, let's start with the discipline of identity and access management and its surrounding activities like IGA, identity governance and administration, and things like identity hygiene and cleanup and PAM, all these different surrounding technologies. You wouldn't be able to do non-human or workload or agentic AI identity without having built the foundation with what we have now as a discipline. We've learned a lot. We've learned how to do SSO. We've learned how to, basically provide for reasonably accurate inventory of identity. It's still hard, and we know how to do protocols. So we've got a baseline. Now, I would say that there are some companies that are well positioned and some that are not. The ones that are well positioned are the ones that still maintain a somewhat thoughtful approach to research and development and are always trying to disrupt themselves. Like that's the measure we use at TAG. The company that I run, we're an advisory firm that looks ahead. We're not sort of like this Gartner Forrester draw a picture of, who's the best, IGA vendor. They're going to go, SailPoint, Savient, and probably because they paid them. I know I shouldn't say that, but I think it's probably true. But we look ahead. So when I look ahead now, I think, what vendors are looking ahead? Who's flexible? Who's thinking, I can adapt my platform to agentic. It's going to require that we assume at the other end it's not a human being. So obviously bio becomes silly, right? You wouldn't use biometrics. And also there's no idea of downtime ever. It's always up, always continues, always running, always, and some of it may be life and safety critical, So you almost don't know, in advance whether you're dealing with something truly consequential, and on and on. And again, the different vector of metadata, the definition of identity will be different. There'll be an AI bomb, bill of materials that provide provenance as to where the AI comes from. So you know the lineage. That'll be part of your identity. Like for you and I, somebody says, "Hey, Rosie, who are you?" Or "Hey, Ed, who am I?" We start thinking about our parents and our grandparents and where they came from and our background. AI agents, same thing. What were you made of? What components were you built from? Where were you spawned? How are you governed? How are you managed? What guardrails exist around you? These all become part of the identity. They become a new set of metadata we need to keep track of. Now, you guys, Sphere, I know your company well. You guys, I think, are well positioned because you've always been around looking at what exists and making it better. I love that so much. And I think that'll be sort of the nature of where most of the business will be. I think it'll be around taking scenarios and making sure the guardrails are working and things are properly attended to. There's going to be a nice business there. Like AI hygiene will be part of it. Really.
Yeah. And the way that what we've been focused on lately, I mean, not even lately, it all comes down, in my mind, it comes down to ownership, right? It comes down to that whether you're talking about explainability, whether you're talking about auditing, what an AI agent has to do, well, who's doing the auditing? If you're relying on another AI agent to do that auditing and an AI agent to do that auditing, ultimately it needs to lead to some human who is able to look and just like, the relationship between a worker and their supervisor and their manager, right? Whether you're doing one-on-ones or regular reviews or check-ins, those kinds of things. I almost think about you have to do the same kind of thing with an AI agent. If we're talking about a service account, for example, a service with a service account, and I want to see what that service account did, I could look at the logs, and it's very explainable. Okay, at exactly 3 p.m. it did this, and at 3:05 it did that, right? With AI, it becomes a lot more difficult to understand and to explain exactly why it made the decisions. But I almost think about it as just like a human. It's sometimes difficult to explain why a human made the decisions that they made. You almost have to look at that AI, that agentic AI, the same way, right? But it comes down to ownership at its very core, whether you're talking about a machine identity, a service account, a human account, secondary human account. You need to have that human who's responsible for seeing what is happening, why it made the decisions, and then take corrective action, right? And I think that's the core of at least what we do at Sphere, and the way that we're going to be tackling the agentic AI problem as it evolves over the years is with that kind of human oversight at the core of this technology, because as you said, it is just a new technology.
The place where I always had problems, where I see a lot of our tag clients having problems, and I'll use service accounts as an example before we get back to AI. That with service accounts, you're right. If you're aware of it and you can go and look, you can see what the damn thing did. But where I always had problem was not knowing that it was there. Like going, it did what? It is what? We have what? That was always it. So inventory and posture and understanding what you have is all part of that hygiene equation. It's not just sort of cleaning up. I make a list of what I have and we're good. We trim all the edges and we're good. It's usually, I have no idea what I have. And that's always been the thing that's bit me. If you go back through my career, I've been at this for 40-something years, 43 years. You think about all the different incidents I've been dragged through or caused. Almost everyone, I bet if I went back, it would probably be everyone, involves something we didn't know about in advance. It's almost never, I have my eye on this thing, I know it's there, and some amazingly capable offensive actor comes in and boom, get you. It's never that. It's always, I'm looking here, and then somebody's tapping me on the shoulder, and I'm going, stop bothering me. I'm looking at this thing, and no, you ought to look at this. Look at what? This thing over here. What thing over there? Here, look at this thing. And you go, what's that? And that's the thing getting hacked. So that's been true for service accounts, and I think it's going to be true for AI as well. I think right now what's happening is most businesses don't have a good inventory of what's going on. And we call that a wildfire model at TAG. We say AI is breaking out like wildfires all over the place. And then vendors come in and inaccurately say, oh, we'll discover all your AI. And they go, no, you're not. You're going to have an approximation, but it's really hard to figure out what's going on when you're the CISO because it's not the clean stuff I can find. It's the crazy one-off partnership with a university, joint venture I didn't know about, company we acquired I never heard of, 3 people off in a lab who connected to something I didn't know. It's all that. And I think that's all going to be part of the identity equation, making sure that I have good, solid inventory, assigning and managing the identity, and then applying policy. Once you know that something's there, usually you can manage it. But when you don't know it's there, God
It's
help.
interesting.
Yeah.
I have a deck that I do for analysts, and I kind of it's like 4 areas that we talk about of where customers will bring us in. One of them is maturity. And I'll talk about that. They think they're like 95% of the way there. They think they got a really good handle on their IM program, on their IGA, on their PAM program. They want us to come in and get us to that 100%, right? And what I say is that almost every single one that brought us in specifically for maturity, what we end up discovering is finding that actually they're not as mature as they thought they were. They thought they were at 95, they're really at 50. Sometimes they thought they were at 95, they're really at like 10, right? Because they don't have exactly what you're saying. They don't have the visibility. You could own, if you know something exists and it's a problem, you're probably going to want to fix it. You're probably going to fix it. It's the things that you don't know about that will get you. So if we think about that, right, because we are in this kind of gold rush of AI right now, everyone is rushing. If you're a vendor, you have to talk about AI. If you sell anything these days, you have to talk about AI. And as a result, you might have essentially shadow AI identities popping up where it's a product you may have had for 10 years. All of a sudden, they introduce some element of agentic AI or AI into the product. The end user might be giving their own credentials for that AI agent to do stuff, and that AI agent could be doing things like sending emails or scheduling meetings or doing work that a human would typically do. How concerned are you with this kind of shadow AI issue that's popping up everywhere?
I mean, dude, shadow is another way of saying I don't know it's there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I mean, shadow, normally a CISO or a CIO would think of shadow as stuff you and I do from home. On our you have a company issued Windows machine, you're nice and tidy, you're sitting in the office as I'm sitting here today, and you're connected in through the corporate network and you go through a firewall and we're good, nice and tidy, you follow the rules. Like, for example, you don't hang out on gambling websites, betting on NFL or something. That'd be something you'd use your Zscaler to block. And you justify it saying, I prefer my employees don't, use the bet on NFL games while they're working. But then, I mean, you just take your phone, or maybe there's bathed in Wi-Fi, or the deli next door might have Wi-Fi that you can, or you just leave the office and go over to Starbucks, and you can take out your phone and bet on NFL games during work hours. I mean, that's what most people think of as shadow. And that's an extremely difficult problem. Now, when I'm sitting and I'm doing approved stuff, and I'm interacting with a vendor, a SaaS app, or a service, or something that I've approved, and then there's something new that I don't realize is going on, that's a different flavor of shadow. That's sort of a lack of awareness of the posture that you've got and the service characteristics that you've approved. So that's one where you usually have some sort of proxy. That's where CASBs were originally invented, because we didn't know what people were doing in Box and Dropbox and all these early cloud software systems that people wanted to use. And nobody had any idea what was going on. So you run a CASB to see, well, you're doing what? And that was, in a sense, shadow. So what you're describing is deja vu all over again. You're connecting to what? You're using Canva to do what? So Canva, for example, will draw pictures. But we'll draw a picture of your CEO, eating turtles or doing some creepy thing. I mean, I don't know. It's like,
Hmm.
so CISO, you go, do I approve that? If you say, no, you can't approve that because the CISO doesn't eat turtles, you'd go, you're not going to let me use this tool because you're worried about that. I probably could have done that on PowerPoint anyway. Like, I just won't do that. You have to have terms and conditions and acceptable use, and things work themselves out, right? So I don't see this as being a dramatic departure in terms of policy and even shadow, but you got to do it, right? You have to do it. Just like we had to do it for the internet, we had to do it for the World Wide Web, we had to do it for mobility, we had to do it for apps. Now we have to do it for AI. So just a continuation. And by the way, each generation believes that the thing that's happening is the most consequential thing that had ever happened in the history of humankind. Think for a minute. You probably have somebody somewhere who's listening to us right now that was born after 1995. If they were, then they've always been alive when there's been a World Wide Web. But you and I
Hmm.
know that in the 80s there was no such thing. There's an internet. There's no World Wide Web. So when the web emerged in the 90s, we all went, this does what? You can do what? IBM will have a website, but Rosie and Ed could have, like, we could sell baseballs online or something as our own, and we're on equal footing with IBM, and I could do 10 of them and I can sell things. Oh my gosh. Welcome to e-commerce. Welcome to freaking Amazon.com. You wouldn't have Amazon.com if we hadn't had
Hmm.
that amazing innovation. And then look at Uber. You look at how that works. You think about the disruption that creates, and it was enabled basically by LTE. If you didn't have 4G service, how are you going to do Uber? You wouldn't be able to, but you could because you have iPhones. Now you have AI. We go, oh my gosh, what's this going to do? This changes everything. The reason it's such a jolt is because it's changing white collar jobs as opposed to blue collar. So the white collar workers have always been like, well, disruption. Hey, you guys are working in the factory. I'm really sorry, but it's thank goodness it's not affecting me with my accounting or computer science degree. Well, now it's affecting people with accounting and computer science degrees, and we freak out, but it's not any different. It's just disrupting a different group, and we'll respond accordingly. So things will find its way, but disruption is the norm. That's what we do. If you don't like it, get out of the boat, because this is what we're in. You sign up for this if you want to do tech. It's disrupt.
It's interesting. You reminded me of the first time I had explained to my son when he was much younger that he couldn't just watch something on TV if it wasn't on yet. It was like, I don't understand. I'm like, well, it's a show that's on live TV. He goes,
Linear
well,
versus
why
something.
can't you just find it? And I was like, no, it doesn't work that way, right? I had to explain to him which the concept was completely foreign to him, because anytime he wanted to watch something, he could watch it on demand. Meanwhile, and actually just the other day I had to explain to him what a typical Friday night would be during the Blockbuster days, right? You would go to Blockbuster, you would spend an hour looking for a movie, hoping that the tape was there, that it wasn't already checked, that movie wasn't already checked out, and then you'd go home and you'd watch the movie, because it
Yeah,
came up because I had explained to him what Be Kind Rewind. Remember those stickers on the
absolutely.
VHS tapes? And
Yeah.
think about it, that whole concept is completely foreign now, right?
I
To
mean,
anyone
Rosie,
born after
disruption
1985.
comes and gets you. I mean, look, I was listening, I was on some panel somewhere, and they were lamenting that, wow, now anybody can create. Like, whoa, this is crazy. Anyone can create. And I think, have they paid attention to the music business? Have they paid attention to, I mean, just look what the internet did to being a rock and roll band. Like, you think you took away their way of living. You don't sell albums. You and I I guess you bought an album at one point in your life. I did
Yeah.
too. Have you bought an album or a piece of music in the last 15 years, 20 years? No, of course not. So that whole thing goes away. And, it's like, well, what about the industry it disrupts? My daughter's in that industry. She's a musician. You change it. She plays. She's out. So suddenly live music is something we covet. I mean, I'm not going to go to some bar and listen to an AI play through the speakers? Who wants to hear that? I want to see a band. I want to see a human being, a jazz club where they're up there playing, a rock band that's really playing. That I love, but I'm not going to go buy an album because I don't even know what that means anymore. And also on this idea of being able to just invent or create, think about that. If you mentioned with your child, like with the wanting to watch something, if you have YouTube, you and I can think of a thing and I can pull it up. If I go, I wonder what was the first Brady Bunch episode. Boom,
Hmm.
watch. Or, you know something, I wonder what was Pete Rose's last at bat for the Reds. Boom, pull it up. I mean, it's this crazy thing we couldn't conceive of, but now we take it for granted. So the idea that maybe I can create a movie or something with using AI, we'll go, yeah, what of it? I mean, you
Hmm.
just life goes on, but the one thing that does remain is cybersecurity will still be an issue. It's just different. There'll always be people wanting to misuse anything. Like if you
Yeah.
want something that doesn't change, it's that there will always be mischief on one end of the spectrum and terrible, terrible nation state domination and crime up to killing at the other end of that spectrum of misuse, from benign to really malicious. That's not going to go away. Like I don't think human beings wake up one day and we're all enlightened. I wish that would happen, but it's unlikely. But
Yeah,
we're
and if you think about the like as you were kind of describing the different generations of things, I've always been in financial services where I remember a time where rarely did you have access to email and you rarely had access to the internet and
in the
everyone
early
had it.
days. Yeah.
Or like, I remember the time where traders were asking for AOL IM, right? Because they needed to be able to talk to their peers and they felt like they were at a disadvantage. And then the compliance people were like, no way, I have no way to monitor that. You can't get access to that. But we figured that out, right?
Of course.
To social media and being able to have access to Twitter and properly manage it. There's all these iterations. So in your view, AI is just another one. It might seem more disruptive because, as you said, it attacks the white collar kind of information worker, or it could displace that information worker. But at the end of the day, that information worker will just have to do a different role. Right now, they are someone who's specializing in proper prompting and proper analysis of what an AI is doing, as opposed to generating countless documents manually that are just kind of wasting their entire day of doing this. So it's just another technology that humanity will use, just like we learn to use spreadsheets and
Let me give you an
documents.
example. So I've been giving final exams since 1989 to graduate students. It's always this written thing where they go through and they write something and I read it and I give them a B plus or whatever. It is what it is. Next year, I'm going to be trying something different at NYU. I'm trying to work out the math of it, but I usually have in my one of the master's courses that I teach it's a joint NYU Law School, NYU Computer Science and Engineering program. I'm thinking next year the final exams will be face to face,
Hmm.
oral, and I don't mean over Zoom. I mean let's sit down and talk because they come to campus, and I might make that it's going to be a lot of time if I spend 30 minutes with 50 people. That's 25 hours. But whatever. Over a week, there'd be 5 hours a day for 5 days. You go on vacation like that. If you do them in the morning and in the evening, you probably even work a normal day. But think about how that changes the education process. Then I want you to use AI. I don't care about whether you push a button, ChatGPT produces a report. If that helps you, do it. I don't care if you're watching YouTube videos. Do whatever you need to do to learn how SSO works or Kerberos works or firewall rules or authentication protocols. I want you to learn that. But then we're going to sit down over a cup of coffee and I'm going to talk to you and see if you were present this semester. And if I ask you a few things, do you understand it? And if you don't understand it, I'd rather you go back and learn it. We'll go have another cup of coffee and let's go over. Like it's a different way of teaching and learning and doing things. I would argue way better. it's more work for the teacher. And that's why teachers are so freaked out. But when I hear about, like in schools, they go, oh, we make the kids no using AI, back to blue book with pencil, write the exam out. I think you're going backwards, not forward. And if I'm on your school board, I used to be the president of the school board in my town, I would be furious. I'd say, no, 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 no. We need to train people for the world they're going to live in, not the world we lived in. You train them for the future. This whole, going back, back to some, what are you, crazy? The world is going this way. We need to be advancing and planning. So AI is part of the future. It's part of it for CISOs. And for the people listening, you and I would typically attract a cybersecurity crowd and tech crowd and so on. The ones listening, if you're the naysayer always coming up with examples of why AI doesn't work, I remember your predecessor years ago saying that about the internet, and they all got fired. So rethink whether you want to fight against waves coming at you, or whether you want to turn around and swim with them. They're a little different. Go try and stop a wave, good luck. But get a surfboard and ride it, it can be awesome. And I think that mindset change is something you'd asked earlier. Who's ready, who's not? Anybody who's introspective about, am I on board with this? Or am I fighting it every step of the way? If you're the latter, God help you. If you're the former, you're going to have a nice 20-year run. This is going to be good stuff.
Awesome. So Ed, you know what? Before we go to the fun question, I do have one last question for you, just specifically for you. So, given that you do this as well, right? You have podcasts and you have your video series. What haven't I asked you?
Well, I think that the question of misinformation, disinformation, and deep fakes is something I don't know that I have a good answer to. Like, I worry about the fact that, for example, you and I could be pretty easily spoofed as Rosie and Ed talking, and it could be weird stuff coming out of our mouth. That's a weird concept. Like, I'm not sure that bill of materials or digital signature or even some of the technology that'll look at and prove that something is fake, whether that's going to be sufficient. And similarly, misinformation, where somebody might, swear in a stack of Bibles that you and I did not do a podcast today. And this was not us. And they'll swear that, and you go, well, we did. And they go, well, prove it. Well, here's a video. Well, that's a fake. It's a little weird. Like, I think that's one, my own research, I think really hard about how that problem can be solved. That one probably strikes me as a little bit behind the question of, can I build guardrails for using LLMs and Gen AI? That I feel more comfortable with. But deep fakes I feel less comfortable with. And I think what happens is that just like you and I, if we're looking at an email, let's say, typically from my mom, she's an Italian lady, she'll go, Eddie, come over here, look at this email, is this real? And I'll look and it'll be some fake energy company saying she didn't pay her bill and, click here. And I go, Mom, that's obviously fake. And she go, oh, it looks so real. You and I probably will never get to the point where we look at something and know it's fake, but I have a feeling there'll be this innate thing where when I'm the grandpa and my grandchild says, and I say, oh, come over here, help grandpa. Is this video real? And they go, Grandpa, it's obviously a fake video. Look at this. And I'll go, oh, I didn't know that looked so real. Maybe it's the actuarial tables that fixes this and I don't know. But that one, I'm less comfortable about, because I think that that's still, from a technical perspective, a lot of open questions. There's a lot of cool companies that are trying to fix that. I think those companies have very promising futures, but the threat is a little bit more unknown at this point. So that's one. You and I didn't really talk much about that. And does identity play there? Absolutely. The identity of the creator, the access rights to how the thing is manipulated or used. There's probably a whole set of identity and access management requirements that'll be attached to multimedia to try to protect them. But we'll see, right?
We'll see. So now we reached the part where we'll ask a completely
You're going to ask
unrelated
me a
to
you're going to
technology.
ask me a math question now?
No,
Make
no,
me
it's a fun question.
okay.
Well, actually, you probably would like a math question, given that
I
you
don't
went to
know.
Stevens, right, and your background. No, no, this is we always do this at the very end, completely unrelated, not
Oh,
related to anything we were talking about, not related to technology. Okay, so if you could get a one-way ticket to live in any fictional universe, a book, movie, TV show, any fictional universe, but it's a one-way ticket, where are you going, and what role would you be playing?
well, I'm from New Jersey, right? So I guess I'd probably want to be in the Corleone family.
Okay.
Now, you said fictional, so I don't want to kill anybody, but man, that's cool stuff, right? Like I would like to, talk to the Godfather and, go around, drink wine and be at all those parties. Maybe the murder part, I'm not sure I'd like, but
Murder, extortion, all
I'm
the.
from the Jersey Shore, so I watch The Sopranos and I watch God. So if it just transport into a fictional place just to dance around and see what it's like, that, assuming that all the people getting killed are part of the fiction, I think that
Yeah.
would be fun. But those are movies that I like. I like gangster movies. Welcome to
Yeah.
that's the Jersey in me, I guess,
Well,
right?
I mean, I grew up in New York, and of course, as you could probably tell from my last name, I'm also Italian.
You and I would have the right names to be, part of that.
Yeah, the Amoroso family and the Master
It's fun.
Giacomo family. Yeah,
Not fun in real life, but fun.
no, no, definitely not fun. But growing up in the East Coast with an Italian last name, it was I grew up. Probably I shouldn't have been watching some of those movies at the age I was
I
watching them, but
know. I
you
know.
grew up with
Probably
it,
got a
right?
lot of your viewers mad at me, but it's just fun.
But if you think about it, it's what you're exposed to, right? Whenever you saw an Italian in a movie, at least when I grew up, it was probably a gangster, right?
No,
The guy
ditto.
that drove the nice car, wore the nice suit, was
It's
probably, you
ditto.
know,
It's
a
terrible.
gangster, right? And that's kind of what you grew up with, and you start associating yourself with that because,
The world is better now. I mean, when I was
yeah,
in telco, there were all these. I came after the era where AT&T was catching a lot of the gangsters. But some of the places like in Little Italy on Mulberry Street where you see all these old social clubs where they caught like John Gotti and everything. Those things don't exist anymore. I think it's like a shoe store now, where it was like a bunch of gangsters. It's an upscale shoe store. So much better. But in terms of fiction and just sort of the pleasure of just narrative and movies and fiction and fun. I mean, those are interesting movies to me. That's just the generation I grew up in.
you see. Clearly, this is an unrelated question because we started with AI and security and cybersecurity and all that, and we ended up with
You
talking about
mentioned the Brady
gangsters.
Bunch earlier. I'd like to play on that AstroTurf backyard they had in the Great Brady Bunch. That'd be pretty
Yeah,
good.
that awesome house. Yeah, I did always want to live in that house. So Ed, this was fantastic. You have an open invitation anytime you want to come back
Oh, you
on.
bet.
Is there anything while I have you on? Is there anything you wanna pitch? Anything you wanna tell people about that you want to send people to?
Well, you know that my company Tag, we tried to disrupt. I was the theme of disruption, disrupt the analyst community. That's what we've been about. We try to make it a little bit less about the money, more about unbiased expert views that help practitioners. That's what we do. Most of us within Tag are at a point in our career where we do this for purpose, not to make partner at some company. So I think when we recommend something or make a claim, people listen because they know that the motivation is not you gave me a bunch of money so I'm going to say you're great. It's rather let's talk about what you're doing, and if it isn't great, it isn't great. If it is great, I'll be happy to say that. So I think that's what the analyst community should be. It should be a smaller industry of people who have long careers that do it for purpose, as opposed to a big monster industry where billions, where people throw a lot of money in and it's all about revenue. That's not a good way to provide guidance. So that's what we do at Tag. We try to turn that on its head.
Yeah, and I would strongly recommend our viewers to look up your Tag Talk, that series that you've
Oh
been
yeah.
posting. I've really been enjoying those. In some instances, I think the young people like to say, throw shade at certain
I'm going to do
organizations.
one right now. I'm going to do one on Broadcom in a little while, so you have to look it
Yeah,
up.
I've really been enjoying those. I've been commenting on some of those as I watch those. So I look forward to the next one. But Ed, thank you so much for joining us today, and talk to you soon.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Smells Like Identity Hygiene. Smells Like Identity Hygiene is a production of Sphere Technology Solutions, and our producer is Matthew Clay. Until next time.